everybody, this is Munson Steed, and I am so proud to join you and me. And there is a super CEO who's doing amazing things. Hails out of Kansas City, so get your barbecue, get your life together, and go make a visit. It is truly a transformation is happening there. It is the preservation of both our pride, our privilege, and the history that distinguishes us from many greats. I'm talking about none other than the one and only Bob Kendrick, CEO and president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
Man, it is so good to catch up with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's get right to it. When we think about why an individual needs to go make this migration and actually take the journey, give me three reasons why they should go in and take the time to spend time and know that this is for them in their history and legacy.
Well, first and foremost, it's a forgotten piece of Americana. It had basically been ignored for decades, really until this museum came forward and thought it started to bring it to the forefront. What people are now discovering is that it is one of the greatest chapters, not in baseball history, but in American history. Instead, it is one of the greatest American success stories in the annals of American history. It is anchored against the ugliness of American segregation, a horrible chapter in this country's history. But out of segregation rose this wonderful story of triumph and conquest. And as I like to say, it is all based on one small, simple principle. You won't let me play with you in the major leagues. Okay, I'll create a league of my own. And that's exactly what they did here in Kansas City on February 13th, 1920. A Chicagoan, by the fact, by the name of Andrew Rube Foster, would lead a contingent of 8 independent Black baseball team owners into Kansas City, and they formed the Negro National League. The Negro Leagues would then go on to operate for 40 years and give us some of the greatest athletes to ever put on a baseball uniform.
You know, when you think about that, and we want to think about it, and you think about a Satchel Paige,
Yes.
what should we know about the depth of the man, and what are those literal insights that you can share that all of us can take his testimony and apply it to any aspect of life, how he approached life?
Well, number one, how he pulled himself out by the bootstraps, literally. Because Satchel had a very troubled childhood. He was in a reform school and he got a second chance and he discovered baseball and he discovered a hidden talent. And when we Satchel Paige, in my own opinion, we're talking about the GOAT, the greatest pitcher this sport has ever seen. We know for certain the oldest rookie in the history of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball says the old man was 42 years old when he finally got his opportunity to pitch in the major leagues in 1948 with the Cleveland Indians. Satchel was likely closer to 52 than 42. He never told his real age. It still remains an age-old mystery of just how old Satchel was, and he was still dominating at an ungodly age for any athlete. He was absolutely amazing. He combined everything that you needed. In a league that was filled with big stars, he was the biggest and brightest. Yeah, you combine the longevity. By his estimation, he pitched in over 2,600 games. The great stuff. Recorded some 55 no-hitters and only God knows how many strikeouts. And the charisma. Steve, he was the Muhammad Ali of baseball before we ever knew who Muhammad Ali was. He could sell it, but he could back it up. He would ride into the small towns, and the entire towns would shut down to watch the old man do his thing, guaranteed to strike out the first 9, and more times than not, he did.
You bring up a point. They traveled, seen the movies, moving around the country and being able to know that we brought pride in the crowds. What
Yes.
should we know if you were to actually speak to a group of people about taking this vision and being able to transform in any time to know how great you are just by going in and seeing the business aspects of how we approach this.
Well, and you just something that is oftentimes overlooked, and I can understand why, because it's so easy to fall in love with the romantic nature of these courageous athletes who, as I like to say, forged a glorious history in the midst of an inglorious time in American history, that we do sometimes lose sight that the Negro Leagues was the third largest Black-owned business in this country. It only trailed Black-owned insurance companies who emerged during that era, as you know, and would insure African Americans more than the 10 to 15 cents that the white insurance companies would insure us. Essentially, the white insurance companies would insure me just enough to bury me, a 10, 15 cent policy. Well, Black-owned insurance comes about and not only insured my livelihood, but insured my stock, my crop, my home, and as a result, made millions of dollars. And as we like to say, next was Madam C.J. Walker, this country's first self-businesswoman of any skin color, the first to earn $1 million with a business structure, and she did it doing black hair. Next was Negro Leagues Baseball. And if my dear friend, the late great Buck O'Neill, the founder of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, legendary Negro League in his own right, if he was with us, he'd tell you, all you needed, man, was a bus, two sets of uniforms, and you'd have 20 of the greatest athletes who ever lived. But this was big business. These owners were making a tremendous living. The ball players were making a living playing the game that they love. And as I tell people, and I try to describe the totality of Negro Leagues baseball, it is fascinatingly complicated because when we lost the Negro Leagues, we lost that catalyst that sparked economic development in so many urban communities. Yeah, we gained integration and it advanced us socially, but man, it was devastating economically. Wherever you had successful Black baseball, you typically had thriving Black economies. Your hometown of Chicago, oh, the South Side was jumping. And at the heart of that were the Chicago American Giants, who were playing games at Old Comiskey Park. And they filling up the ballpark, and all those Black fans are coming right back to the South Side. And what are they doing? They patronizing all those segregated, mandated Black-owned businesses. So those businesses were flourishing. And then when we lost the Negro Leagues, and then we left the leagues too, because we wanted to see how Jackie and Larry Doby and Satchel, Don Newcomb, how they were going to fare when they got their opportunity to play in the major leagues. And that's a natural curiosity, but it had tremendous impact on Black businesses.
You know, when you think of Louis Armstrong and his role, what attracted him and what, for many that don't know, made him want to be a part of that Negro League family.
Because he loved baseball. But you know, Black folks loved baseball then. Everybody loved baseball. And there was no bigger fan of baseball than Black folks during that era. But Louis Armstrong's first love was baseball. He wanted to be a professional baseball player. He just happened to be a better trumpeter. And so he chose the right path. But there's a wonderful photograph that we have of Louis Armstrong and his semi-pro baseball team called the Armstrong Secret Nine. And they were based out of New Orleans, as they would say. And as I tell my guests, interestingly enough, all the jazz musicians wanted to be baseball players. All the baseball players wanted to be jazz musicians. So it was only fitting that they would come together here in Kansas City, where you had the best of both worlds, jazz and baseball radiating from that one street corner known as 18th and Vine, which in its heyday was as recognized street cross section as there was anywhere in the world. And so Cab Calloway had his own semi-pro Black baseball team. And you would see Lena Horne throwing out the first pitch at a game. The legendary vibraphonist Lionel Hampton was a Kansas City Monarch fan. As a matter of fact, my dear friend Buck O'Neill would put Hamp in a Monarch uniform and he would sit on the bench and serve as an honorary coach. Yeah, that's the connection that was there, though, between that world of jazz and baseball. And as you know, they were traveling what we then called the Chitlin Circuit. Yeah, they were mapping out safe havens where there were places for them to stay, places for them to eat. And by day, the jazz artists would come and watch the ball players do their thing. And by night, the ball players would go watch the jazz artists do their thing. So there was always this mutual admiration for what the others did. But you know what, Steve? It hadn't changed. All the rappers want to play and all the players want to rap.
You bring up a great point for those relationships between talents. When we go in and actually visit the museum, what do you families and why should families come and share with their children and the characteristics and the character of the men that they'll see?
For me, and I believe this wholeheartedly, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is one of America's most important civil rights, social justice institutions. Man, it's just seen through the lens of baseball. But more importantly, it is triumph over that adversity. Because most of our civil rights institutions, while they are so vitally important, they're painful. You feel it when you go through there. There's a weight that you carry. But see, the Negro Leagues Museum provides what I believe to be a counterintuitive look at the civil rights movement because this is uplifting. It is inspiring. Yeah, the stage is set against the backdrop of segregation, a horrible chapter in this country's history. But as I mentioned earlier, out of segregation came this wonderful story of triumph and conquest. And so you see us in all of our glory. You see the way we went dressed to those games. I mean, you're talking about dressed to the nines. And Negro Leagues baseball was so popular that Black churches would move their service time up an hour. Now, I don't even have to tell you, if you know anything about the Black church, you know you don't mess with service time. 11 o'clock Sunday go to meeting. When the Chicago American Giants were at home, Kansas City Monarchs were at home, service started at 10 o'clock. And then everybody filed out going to that Sunday doubleheader. It brought a tremendous sense of pride to our community. And I love when I see the entire family structure come to the museum because they're passing this history down. And as you know, there are so many gaps in the pages of American history books. And so without these cultural institutions like the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, how are we going to learn about ourselves? We are essentially being eradicated from the pages of American history books as we speak. And so it requires an institution like the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum to bring this history to the forefront. But it's important that you see my journey in its totality. I don't want the only images of me that resonates with you are those downtrodden experiences in my journey seeking equality in this country. So you've seen me sprayed with water hoses. You've seen the police dogs released on me. You've seen me enslaved. You've seen the police brutality that still manifests itself today. But what about my success stories? Yeah, there's very little commonality in my downtrodden experiences. We gain commonality when you look at my success stories. And again, the Negro Leagues is one of America's greatest success stories.
When we think about the record books and setting the record straight, there has been obviously a movement to acknowledge the successes and to bring forward those records that traditionally and prior to now have been kept out. Where
Mhm.
are we on that? And
Yeah,
how do we now fare with knowing that the giants that we are the descendants of now have taken their place in the game of baseball?
it was a seminal moment for, I dare I say, Black baseball history, Negro Leagues history, American history, when last May 29th of 2024, it became official that the statistics Negro Leagues were entered into the record books of Major League Baseball, and that Major League Baseball had long last recognized the Negro Leagues for what I've always known it to be, a major league. But this became official. And it was indeed a watershed moment, particularly for the handful of Negro League players who are still with us, their families, to see this level of atonement and recognition for what they had accomplished. And now to see the names of Josh Gibson and Oscar Charleston and Norman Turkish Stearns and Boo June Wilson listed right there amongst the names of the great white major leaguers of yesteryear. And Steve, we knew, we worked on this thing almost 4 years. And I have to tip my cap to the commissioner of Major League Baseball who did what others could have done and didn't do. Yeah, he opened the door for this opportunity. And we knew there would be some kickback from I guess you could call them the so-called baseball purists who just simply don't believe that if it didn't happen in the major leagues, well, it couldn't have happened. And we're here to tell you it did. And as I try to remind them, just because Josh Gibson is now ahead of Ty Cobb, that doesn't diminish Ty Cobb. It just speaks to how great Josh Gibson was. And so these names that you don't know, because you don't know them, don't mean they couldn't play. This should be a portal. It should be a gateway into deeper understanding. You should want to go learn about Josh Gibson. And you should want to learn about Oscar Charleston and these other legendary Negro League stars who now are rated and ranked right there with those major league stars of yesteryear. And there's no better place to come and learn about them than at the Negro Leagues Museum.
And I agree with that. Question: Black women played a role in Negro League. We don't want to ever leave our sisters out. Share the
Exactly.
role that they played, and for those to let us know that the entire community, both men and women, were involved in this movement.
See, what I love about the Negro League, Steve, is that they didn't care what color you were, and man, they didn't care what gender you were. Can you play? Do you have something to offer? And as a result, three pioneering women called the Negro Leagues home as players: Toni Stone, Mamie Peanut Johnson, and Connie Morgan, women who competed with and against the men in the Negro Leagues in the 1950s. Toni Stone is the first female to play regularly in a male professional baseball league. All three played for the Indianapolis Clowns in the Negro Leagues. And Toni would eventually retire from the Kansas City Monarchs. All three were tremendously talented athletes who got an opportunity to live out their dream of playing professional baseball. But there were also women who were owners of Negro League teams and executives: Hilda Bolden, Olivia Taylor, Minnie Forbes, Effa Manley, AKA the Queen of the Negro Leagues, and the first woman to be nominated and inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. So, as I share oftentimes with our female guests, the Negro Leagues gave women an opportunity to do things in this country before this country gave women an opportunity to do things. This was a very pioneering league. And that is why I say that the story of the Negro Leagues embodies the American spirit, unlike any story in the annals of American history. It is everything that America aspires to be, but it is not there yet. And because it's not there yet, doesn't mean that it's not the land of opportunity. It just means that there's still work left to be done. And we wholeheartedly believe that through the lens of these courageous athletes who built the bridge across the chasm of prejudice that allowed others, particularly Black and brown, to cross over and fulfill their dream of playing in the major leagues, that our guests do indeed gain a much better understanding and appreciation for the true value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how they are pillars for building a bridge toward tolerance and respect. And as a society, that is where we're still trying to go. And it is all seen through the eyes of these ball players who, when it's all said and done, man, they just wanted to play ball. They didn't know they were doing any of this stuff that I'm telling you about. They just wanted to play ball.
Super. Well, I want to thank you so much. It's been insightful. I do want to applaud you for your dedication and commitment to harboring and giving a safe harbor to the legacy of those unspoken, unseen giants that live now and are chronicled for future generations to gain knowledge and their own legacy through your commitment as CEO for a person who hasn't stopped loving both the community and our history. I'm Munson Steed. This is CEO to CEO, and I have had the wonderful pleasure of being with the CEO of the National Black Negro League Museum in Kansas City. I want you all to go. It's important that we make this what I consider a journey and a transformation to understand and put on our uniforms. Everybody should have a favorite and a favorite team of this National Negro League Museum. I appreciate you, CEO Bob Kendrick.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.